Hi, welcome to iEducator. This is Teacher Jeff. I'm an educator and an engineer by profession. And today we will discuss Chapter 3. And Chapter 3 is all about the fundamental elements of demand, supply, and market equilibrium. Now, in today's lesson, there are three key areas that I'm going to be highlighting today. First, we have the law of demand. Second, we have the law of supply. And finally, we have market equilibrium. Now, in order for us to get started, let us first discuss what a price theory is. Now, if we say price theory, it is actually a systematic analysis of the factors that determine the prices of different goods. And if we say good, it is anything that has some use. So by the term price itself, it is meant the rate at which any good can be exchanged for any other good. Now, in a barter economy, the pricing of a given commodity or service is not as clearly defined or conveniently determined as is the case in an economy where money is used in effecting transactions. Okay. Now, sometimes people actually think that prices of goods and services are determined by the government. Okay. However, this is only true for the basic goods and services. Okay. Take note about that. The differences of the government prices and actual market prices create problems both to the consumers and suppliers. Now, if government price is much lower than the market price, then sellers are not willing to offer their goods. On the other hand, if government price is much higher than market price, then buyers are forced to reduce the number of goods that they usually purchase. Now, this creates a surplus of goods which will reduce production and create unemployment. So that is one reason why there are a lot of people who are unemployed. Okay. Now, in this case of the buyers, the surplus of goods will decrease prices of said products and therefore encourage them to buy since their purchasing power has increased. And the prices of goods and services are determined by the interaction between demand and supply of goods and services in a market of capitalists' economy. Now, there exist markets for different goods and services. Now, one can think of a textile market. We also have a fish market or a vegetable market, correct? Now, in its ordinary sense, the idea of a market carries with it a reference to a particular building, maybe, or a site, right? However, the concept of a market as used in economics actually differs from this ordinary meaning. So, what does market mean then in economics? Well, as employed by economists, a market refers to a situation where buyers and sellers of commodities reach a meeting of the minds or agreed to make transactions involving certain commodities or services. Now, in this definition, a market does not necessitate the existence of a single building or reference to a particular place where buyers and sellers should gather together in order to transact business. Instead, what is needed in order that there can be a market is for the buyers and sellers to be able to maintain constant communication with each other. Now, you might be asking me, what about if the two parties are located in different parts of the world? Will there still be a market exist? Well, even if the buyer is in the Philippines and the seller is in the other side of the world, a market could still exist if the two parties can agree on a certain transaction, either through a long distance telephone, cell phones, wireless telegraph, internet connections or through the mail. Now, if we say price, it is the value of a product or service. And take note that it is usually expressed in terms of monetary units such as peso, dollar, yen, etc. All right. And price system, on the other hand, determines the allocation of goods and services among the members of society. So, meaning more money means more goods and services. And so, for that matter, at this point, we will now be discussing the first key area of our lesson for today, and that would be the law of demand. So, what do we mean by law of demand then? Now, take note that one of the central points in a free enterprise economy is consumer demand. Now, if we say demand, it is being defined as the schedule of various quantities of a good or commodities that will be bought by buyers at various prices at an interval of time. Now, demand is divided into two types. First, we have the individual demand, and second, we have the market demand. So what's the difference between the two then? If we say individual demand, it actually pertains to the different quantities of a given good which an individual buyer will purchase at different prices during a given interval of time. On the other hand, if we say market demand, it is the summation of individual demands for the same commodity or goods. And therefore, demand must not be held synonymous to mere desire or state of mind toward a given good. Now, why is that so? Because take note that simple desire for a commodity would be meaningless in economics if such desire cannot be translated into actual purchase. So, in short, you cannot just have a desire or a state of mind without an actual purchase. If only desire or a state of mind, it will not be considered demand at all. So, there should be actual purchase. And therefore, an important element, which is a purchasing power, okay, must be taken into account or consideration when the term demand is employed in economic analysis. Now, at this stage, we can now elaborate on the concept of demand. Now, as the definition states, okay, you have there, demand is a schedule of the different quantities of a commodity which will be bought at different prices during some interval of time. Now, if we say interval of time, it may mean a day, a week, or a month. And having said that, the law of demand states that there is an inverse relationship between the price and the quantity demanded, which means that if your price increases, then the quantity demanded decreases. On the other hand, if the price decreases, then the quantity demanded decreases. Now, in order for us to better understand the law of demand, let me show you an example. So, as you can notice, this is an example of an hypothetical demand schedule for a canned milk, okay? As you can see in our tabulation presented, in the first column, you have there the price, okay? So this is expressed in terms of dollars. And on the second column, you have the quantity demanded, okay? And this is expressed in terms of units, okay? Now, as you can notice, so you have there a price of $45 for a canned milk, $30, $20, $10, and $5 respectively. On the other hand, for the quantity, we have 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100. Now, as you can notice, as the price increases, the quantity demanded decreases, right? Because if you buy a canned milk at $45, there are only very few customers buying it, okay? So in this case, there are only 20 customers who bought a canned milk for a price of $45. So on the other hand, if the price decreases, then the quantity demanded increases. So as you can notice, when the price of canned milk, let's say the canned milk is on sale, it can be bought at a price of $5 only. So at $5 price, there are so many customers buying it. So there are 100 customers buying a canned milk. Okay. So this is what the law of demand stands for. Now, in order for us to better understand this, let me show you a graphical presentation on how this information will be plotted. So as you can notice, this is our graphical presentation for our demand curve, okay? As you can see in our graphical presentation, other things being equal, the higher the price, the lesser are quantities demanded by the consumers, and the lower the prices, more quantities are demanded by our consumers. Now, this is the law of demand and is reflected in the negative slope of the demand curve. Now, as you can notice, our demand curve is downward sloping, right? Now, since it's downward sloping, it shows the inverse relationship between price and quantity. Now, the inverse relationship between demand price and the quantity demanded, assuming ceteris paribus factors are held constant. Now, if we say ceteris paribus, this means that other things being equal. Now, this fundamental economic principle indicates that a decrease in the price of a commodity results in an increase in the quantity of the commodity that buyers are willing and able to purchase in a given period of time if other factors are held constant. Now, the law of demand is one of the most important principles found in the study of economics. The law of demand is the scientific relation between demand price and quantity demanded that captures the demand side of the market. Now, when combined with the law of supply or other relevant supply principles, the result is the market model. And the market provides a powerful tool for analyzing exchanges, resource allocation, and efficiency as well. So what do we mean by the inverse relationship of our demand curve then? Now, the inverse relation of this law means that buyers are willing and able to buy more of a good if the price is lower and less of a good if the price is higher. Now, from a scientific method perspective, this indicates that price causes quantity demanded, or more specifically, that a change in the demand price causes a change in the quantity demanded. Now, how do we work with the curve then? Now, take note that the law of demand is conveniently illustrated by a demand curve. In particular, it is illustrated by the negative slope, as mentioned earlier, of a demand curve, such as the one presented earlier. Now, the negative slope of the demand curve means that higher prices are related to smaller quantities and that lower prices are related to larger quantities. So when price goes up, the quantity goes down. And when price goes down, then quantity goes up. Again, going back, this is how our demand curve would look like. Okay, so this is downward sloping. Now, since it's a downward sloping curve showing the law of demand, now you might be asking, what are the reasons, or what is the reason why the demand curve is downward sloping? Now, there are actually three reasons why the demand curve is downward sloping. First, we have the substitution effect. Second, it's because of the income effect. And finally, this is because of the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now, in order for us to better understand each of these, let us discuss them one by one, starting with the substitution effect. Now, what do we mean by substitution effect then? Now, as you can see on the presentation, This is the observation that a change in the price of a good alters the relative prices of substitute goods, which then motivates buyers to buy more or less of the substitute goods and less or more of this good. Now, if the price increases, then the price of substitute goods become relatively lower, inducing buyers to buy more of those goods and a smaller quantity of this good. On the other hand, if the price decreases, then the price of substitute goods become relatively higher, inducing buyers to buy less of those goods and a larger quantity of this good. Now, therefore, a change in price induces an inverse or opposite change in the quantity demanded. Now, in order for us to better understand what substitution effect is all about, then let me provide you an example. So, for example, supposing the price of canned milk goes down, then consumers' quantity demand for milk goes up. Okay, this is because instead of buying juice, people tend to buy milk since it's cheaper. So that is what we call substitution effect. On the other hand, okay, another reason why your demand curve is downward sloping is because of income effect. Now, as you can see, income effect is the observation that a change in the price of a good alters the purchasing power of income, meaning if the price increases, then buyers are able to buy smaller quantity with available income. On the other hand, if the price decreases, then buyers are able to buy a larger quantity with available income. And therefore, a change in price induces an inverse or opposite change in the quantity demanded. Now, in order for us to better understand this, let me give you an example. So, for example, if the price of a canned milk goes down, then people tend to buy more milk because their purchasing power has increased, correct? So if you go to a store, okay, or a grocery store or department and found out that the price of canned milk is on sale, let's say the cost is only $2 per can. Now you'll buy more because you can buy more because technically speaking, your purchasing power has increased because of income effect technically. So supposing today is your payday and you received your salary. So the moment you receive your salary, there is an increase of your money, okay? Especially your cash on hand. So if you have a lot of cash on hand, then your purchasing power will technically increase. So you can buy more milk, especially if the price of the milk is on sale. And the last reason why the demand curve is downward sloping, it's because of the law of diminishing marginal utility. So what do we mean by this law then? Now, this law states that as you continue to consume a given product or commodity, you will eventually get less additional utility or your satisfaction will decrease from each unit you consume. Now, this further means that as you continue to consume anything like canned milk, then the additional satisfaction you're gonna get is gonna start to eventually decrease or diminish. That is what's going on right here. So the very first sip was super refreshing, but the last not that much, okay? Now this concept explains the law of demand and the shape of demand curve because they get people to buy more quantity of milk, but price has to go lower as well because they get less and less additional satisfaction from each can of milk. Now, let's take a look at the changes in the demand curve. Now, your demand curve will also change. So what do we mean by change in quantity demanded? So if we say change in quantity demanded, it refers to a change in the price of a good or a service. So from price, okay, from original price to P sub 1 or second price implies that quantity demanded changes like from original quantity to quantity sub 1 or the second quantity. And in the demand curve, this is shown graphically as a movement along the curve, either upward or downward. Okay, as you can see on the illustrations presented, so you have there in my left side, the downward movement along the demand curve. And in my right side, you have there the upward movement along the demand curve. Now, when can we say that there is a downward movement along the demand curve? Now, if you try to look at our illustration from my left side, so as you can notice, when the price decreases, it decreases from your original price or first price or P sub 1 to the second price or P sub 2. So when the price decreases, okay, your quantity increases, right? As you can notice, your quantity increases when your price decreases. So your quantity 1 increases to quantity sub 2. On the other hand, in my right side corner, you have their upward movement along the demand curve. Now, when can we say that there is an upward movement along the demand curve? Now, there is an upward movement along the demand curve if price increases. As you can notice, from P sub 1, it increases to P sub 2. So when your price increases, your quantity decreases. So as you can notice in the quantity side in your horizontal axis, so you have the quantity 1 decreases to quantity 2. So these are the movements along the demand curve. We have downward and upward movement. Now, there is also what we call shift in demand, or in other words, or other authors call it change in demand. So what do we mean by change in demand or shift in demand? Now, there is a change or shift in demand if there is a change in any of the other factors. When we say other factors, it refers to non-price determinants. So the reason of the shifting of your curve is not because of price, because as you can notice, price is our main factor that changes your demand curve, okay? However, in this case, our demand curve will shift or change not because of price, but because of other factors of demand, or we call this as determinants of demand, that there is a change in demand shown graphically as a shift of the entire demand curve, either to the left or to the right. So in this case, in our first example, you can see there shift to the left, okay? So our demand will shift to the left in this case. Now, as you can see in our figure, okay, now take note that a change in price goes along with the demand curve, right? Like I said earlier, normally it will be the price that will be the reason why your demand curve will shift. But in this case, it's no longer the price. It's because of other factors. So again, like I said, a change in price goes along with the demand curve, but something else other than price change, it will also actually shift your demand curve. For example, okay, in order for us to better understand how your demand curve will shift, not because of the price changes. So let me give you an example. So for example, supposing there is a study comes out and says that canned milk can cause baldness. So if we say baldness, there will be a significant hair loss, okay, in your hair or in your head. So you become bald. So that would cause the entire demand curve to shift to the left, okay? At every single price, take note that people are going to buy less, so the curve will shift to the left. And when your curve will shift to the left, then there is a decrease in demand, okay? Take note about that. Again, if there is a shift to the left, then there is a decrease in your demand curve. Now, aside from price, okay, we talk about a shifting of your demand curve, not because of price changes, but because of other factors. So what are these factors then? Now, as you can see in the right portion of our figure, you have there listings of the factors that cause or causes your demand curve to shift. So first, your demand curve will shift to the left if there is an unfavorable change in consumer taste, okay? So if there is a sudden change of the consumer's taste, then eventually it will shift or it will make your demand curve shift to the left. And also, aside from that, if there is a decrease in the number of buyers, so what can be one reason why there is a decrease in the number of buyers? So let's say, for example, there is a typhoon, okay? Or there is an earthquake. So this community right here, so let's assume that this community is composed of, let's say, 10,000 people. And because there is a typhoon or an earthquake, okay, so they are forced to evacuate to another community. And the businesses in that certain place where the typhoon or earthquake occurred, they will lose customers. So there is a decrease in the number of buyers. So if that happens, then it will make your demand curve shift to the left. And also, we have falling incomes if the product is a normal good, okay? So what is a normal good? We will be discussing that one in detail in the following slides. Also, rising income if product is an inferior good. And we will also be discussing that one later on. And also, a decrease in the price of a substitute good, an increase in the price of a complementary good, and consumer expectations of lower future prices. So these are actually the factors that will make your demand curve shift to the left. Now, on the other hand, you can see there shift in demand curve, and your demand will shift to the right at this point, okay? Now, as you can notice in our figure, the opposite decrease in demand is increase in demand. Again, if there is a shift to the right, there will be an increase in your demand, okay? Shift to the left, decrease. Shift to the right, increase. So every single price, people want to buy more. Okay, the demand curve shifts to the right. Now, what are the factors then that will make your demand shift to the right? Well, your demand will shift to the right if there is a favorable change in consumer taste. Second, if there is an increase in the number of buyers. Third, rising incomes if the product is a normal good. Falling income if product is an inferior good. An increase in the price of a substitute good, a decrease in the price of a complementary good, and consumer expectations of higher future prices. Now, having said all of these, we cannot fully understand as of yet if we will not discuss these types of goods that we mentioned, the normal goods, inferior goods, substitute goods, and complementary goods. Now, in order for us to better understand why our demand will shift either to the left or to the right, then let us discuss first the different types of goods. Now, as you can see, our types of goods are divided into two parts. First, as to function, and second, in relation to income. Now, the types of goods as to function is divided further into three parts. First, we have the substitute goods. Second, we have the complementary goods. And third, we have the independent goods. On the other hand, for the types of goods in relation to income, is divided into two parts. First, we have the superior or normal goods. And second, we have inferior goods. Now, in order for us to better understand each of these types of goods, let us discuss them one by one, starting with the type of goods according to function. So as you can see in our presentation, if we say substitute goods, these are the goods or commodities, or goods are substitutes when the price of one good and the demand for the other goods are directly related. So examples of substitute goods are, we have Coke and Pepsi. So if you can see, as you can notice in our example, so if the price of Coca-Cola increases, then the demand of Pepsi goes up. As you can see in our sample presentation, supposing if the price of Coca-Cola increases, then the demand of Pepsi products goes up, okay? Now, on the other hand, if the price of Coca-Cola decreases, then the demand of Pepsi goes down because they are substitute goods. Another substitute goods that we have here as our example, we have coffee and tea. We have burger in McDonald's versus the burger in Burger King. And we also have potatoes Sam's Farm and potatoes Fred's Farm. So these are all substitute goods. On the other hand, if we say complementary goods, goods are considered complementary when the price of one good and the demand for the other are inversely related. So these goods usually go together such that the absence of one renders the other one useless. So examples of complementary goods are, you have there the CD and the tape, okay? Because if you don't have the CD itself, then the demand of the other one or the disc is useless. And another example of complementary products, that would be guns and bullets. Why guns and bullets? Because the absence of one renders the bullets useless. And also we have tables and chairs and so on and so forth. Finally, the last type of good according to function is we have independent goods. Goods are considered independent if goods are not in any way related with one another. Examples of independent goods are cement and wine. Okay, do they have any relationship with each other? Of course not, right? So they are not in relationship with each other, and that makes them independent goods because they are not related at all. Another example of independent goods are apple and bread, okay? We also have shampoo and needle and a lot more. And the second type of good is in relation to income. And under relation to income type of good, this is divided into two parts. And the first is superior or normal good. So what do we mean by superior or normal good? If we say superior or normal goods, commodities whose demand varies directly with money income, or these are commodities whose demand varies directly with income. If we say superior or normal goods, these are commodities whose demand varies directly with income. So meaning to say, if the income increases, then the demand also increases. Or if the income decreases, then the demand also decreases because they vary directly with each other. And examples of superior or normal goods are the basic commodities. We have rice, okay? We also have bottled water, all right? And lastly, we have inferior goods. If we say inferior goods, these are goods whose demand varies inversely with income. So therefore, if the income increases, then the demand decreases. Or if income decreases, then the demand increases. And examples of inferior goods are our wants or the luxuries. Okay? Now, as discussed earlier, I happened to mention that your demand curve will shift either to the left or to the right, not because of the price, but because of other factors. Okay. Now, these are the non price determinants of demand, or in other words, these are the shifters of demand. So we have the taste and preferences, the number of consumer or the population. We have the price of related goods, which include substitute goods and complementary goods. We also have changes in income, which includes superior or normal goods and inferior goods. We have price expectation and special influences as well. Now, in order for us to better understand each of these, let us discuss them one by one, starting with taste and preferences. Now, taste and preferences are considered as non-price determinants of demand because demand for goods and services increases when people like or prefer them. Okay? If a certain product is out of fashion or style, then the demand for it falls. So, an example of, in order for us to better understand taste and preferences, let me give you an example. So, for example, if there is a study that comes out that says kids who have canned milk in the morning before they go to school do better at school and will make them smart. So, in effect, that will increase the demand because of taste and preferences. And second, number of consumers or population. Now, number of consumers or population is considered as non-price determinants of demand because more people means more demand for goods and services, right? While less people or population means less demand for goods and services as well. And therefore, there are more consumers in an urban community compared to rural area. That is why there are more buyers in the city than in the province. Now, for example, another example, all of a sudden, new customers come into town. So that's going to be an increase in the demand. Why there's new people coming into town? Just like I said earlier, because of typhoon and earthquake. So the people there in that certain commodity who were affected by the typhoon or earthquake were forced to evacuate to another community. So that is why there is a sudden increase in the population. And third, non-price determinant of demand or shifter of demand is what we call price of related goods. This is considered as non-price determinant of demand because when the price of a certain product increases, then people tend to buy a substitute product. Now, in the case of complementary goods, the price of one good and the demand for the other good is directly opposite, while for independent goods which are not related, the change in price of one has little or no effect on the demand for the other. Now, one example of price of related goods, for example, Nestle milk and Magnolia's milk are substitute for each other. Now, if the price goes up for Nestle, then it's more expensive to buy this. And the demand is going to increase for Magnolia's milk. And next, we have changes in income. Now, this is considered as a non-price determinant of demand because the income of people is directly proportional to the quantity of goods and services they can acquire or purchase. Now, if income increases, then demand also increases. And if income declines, then the demand also declines. And take note that income is a little tricky because it depends on the types of products. First, we have the normal or superior goods and inferior goods as well. Again, just a brief recap. If we say superior or normal goods, income and the demand for the product are directly related. So if income increases, then your demand increases as well, and vice versa. On the other hand, inferior goods, income and the demand for the product are inversely related. So when your income increases, then your demand decreases. Or if your income decreases, then the demand increases. So supposing milk is a normal good, okay? So this means that when there's an increase in income, then the demand is going to increase and vice versa. And another non-price determinant of demand is what we call price expectation. So when people expect the prices of basic goods to increase tomorrow or next week, then they tend to buy more of these goods. They decrease their demand if they expect prices will decline tomorrow or in a few weeks' time. And finally, we have special influences. This pertains to government interventions, rules and regulations, and policies. All right, I think that's a good place to stop. If you have questions, please let me know on the comment section below. And if you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button for the latest updates. Thank you.